This topic in Yerushalmi Eruvin, the article Ozva edition, we're on Daf Yugim Amarav. Third line down, Hechavida, which in the Vilna is on Daf Yud Beis Amar Aleph, third line from the bottom, Hechavida. And Korbanei Pnei Moshe, very radically different pshatim in the sugya. Very hard to reconcile Pnei Moshe Lashon in the Gemara. So I'm going to go with Korbanei, which is the way Reb Chaim goes, even though it also is very creative in learning the Lashon of the sugya. Hey, according to Korban, it's a new question. Separate question from the previous sugya, even though it seems to bring in Akum. I mean, it doesn't seem. It does bring in Akum, but Akum here plays a different role than the sugya of yesterday as a third person. Hechavir Hayu Shnaim, they're two Jews. V'irva Eruv, they made an Eruv together. Uva Akum v'Hosif. And a non-Jew came and he added a person on Shabbos. Let's see the Korban inside. He says, there are two people. If you base the sign Kedino, they did a base the sign as appropriate. Because one people or two people, they only get base sign. You need three people to go, and then you can get two base sign per person. But one or two people, you only get one base sign among the two of them. Okay. And a non-Jew came and brought another Jew on Shabbos. So now you have three. And he also added on. He gave them. He said, "Okay, now I brought you another Jew. I can give you an extra 4 saws. So you go up to 6 saws, 6 seam, right? They're stuck. They can't be without more than base time. The Shabbos gremis, because Shabbos when it comes in is what determines that Shabbos. She says Shabbos lotar and ki im beis sign. That's it. They're only allowed to sign. So that's it says Hayushnaim v'Eruv Eruv Echad together v'Akum v'Hosif, and you add another person. When the Shabbos is meaning you can't have more than a base sign. Hayushloisha. Now, what about the other way around? Hayushloisha v'Irvu, and here it says base Shnaim Eruvin. The Korban says Hoshabiru base Shishas in. They made 6 in. Reb Chaim changes the 2 to 3. I'm not sure he doesn't change it to 6, but he changed it to 3. In other words, they're Ma'arib as 3 people can be Ma'arib, which is 16. So as Gil says, Hayu Shlosha v'Iru Shlosha, right? Eruvin, but so they made base 6 to seam. V'akum pachas, and the guy came and took away, swept away one of the Jews. So now only 2 people left. Shabbos beheter. So, but they retain their heter, which they began because everything is determined at the beginning of Shabbos. Rabbi Diva ma Rabbi Nisa shal. Rabbi Diva said that Rabbi Nisa asked. Now you have 3 possibilities of the picture. Ma'ali tein shlosha rosha turin. Can you give 3 triangles? So you see the picture in the Korban and the Korban Pnei Moshe are different pictures, right? Korban has this picture. Can they overlap like that? Pnei Moshe has this picture. Can it be like that? And the Reb Chaim has this picture over here. 3 different possibilities. Okay. So, Ma'alitain Shlosha Roshi Turin. Can you give it 3 triangles? They should be able to go into the other ones based on sign. So, the way Reb Chaim explains it, the question is, this seems to be the same thing according to the Bnei Moshe. No, actually, it's the Bnei Moshe has a different question. The Bnei Moshe may learn the question differently based on their tzir, but I'm going to go with Reb Chaim's understand the question. Is there a Marasayan issue here? In other words, do I say that when you give them each one of their own 2 se'im, each one's own their own base assignment. They can't, and they didn't make an Eruvin between them. So they have to each take a square, so it's clear that each one is separate. Or can they even take two triangles, even though it looks like now they're overlapping, and looks like they'll be carrying from one to each other. So it's all about where they didn't make one Eruv. They made three separate Eruvin. So can they make the three separate Eruvin have to be typically square, 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 in order that it's not looking like they're overlapping, or it could even be in the form of that triangle, the three triangles, despite the fact that it looks like now they're overlapping with each other. And learning this like Reb Chaim, Nisha Maitin Lam Shlosha Rosh Doing Shetiye Zemetal to Toksa Saim Shosev Zemetal Shosei. They're not actually carrying within each person's assignment, but it looks like it. So is the Gemara an issue or not? The Gemara doesn't resolve it. The Gemara just leaves it. Okay, this next one we're going to go to Korban Ei's changes here. Rabbi Yosef Mechista said, "As Rabbi Yosef Yehuda b'Shita Saviv, Rabbi Yosef in our Mishnah goes in the sheet of his father in one respect, of even the argument of his father in another respect." So looking back at the Mishnah, the first Tana our Mishnah, Mekivim Kohen Vachli Bekonachaber Shlosha Tvachim, Bashayoro Dibru Di Rabbi Yehuda, that he can use a mechitza which is not Shesi ve'erev only by a shayoro. Otherwise, you need a mechitza of Shesi ve'erev, horizontal and vertical. Later in the Mishnah it says, "Kol mechitza she'ena shel sheshes v'zerev ena mechitza." Divrei Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. No mechitza can be made unless it's shesi v'erev. Doesn't matter, shayora or not shayora. Okay, so now Gemara expounds on this. So Rabbi Yachim said, "As Rabbi Yosef Yehuda b'shis cholok aviv b'shis aviv he calls shitas aviv b'yachid." Korban changed the next word to pachas mibeis hasayin. Right, he's going on his the sheet of his father that by yachid, even it's pachas mibeis hasayin, it has to be shesi v'erev. Right, they both agree on that. Yehuda doesn't only make it by a shayora. V'cholok aviv. And he argues on his father, b'shayora, yosim beis hasayim. By shayora, more than beis hasayim, not pachas, but yosim beis hasayim. Because the Rabbi Yehuda said, by shayora, even more than beis hasayim, since it's shayora, we let you have just a mechitza shokanim. Rabbi Yehuda does not allow it. Even the shayora does not get mechitza shokanim. Where do you see Rabbi Yehuda says by yachid? Even pachas mibeis here it says Yosef again. The Korban changed it. Even pachas beis hasayim, even less than beis hasayim, so shesi v'erev. Where do you find such a thing? How do you know? Maybe by less than beis hasayim, it'll be makel even by yachid. They don't need shesi v'erev. Just the kana would be enough. Yishmin Amado. So learn out from here. The Mar Rabbi Acha said Tana Rabbi Chanin. We learn Rabbi Chanin said, Rabbi Yosef said, b'shem shvav sheishes, k'shem shchalukim kan kachalukim mikilayim. Just like they argue here, by whether you need a mechitza, just a kind is enough, and you need a mechitza of shesi v'erev. They argue also by kilayim. Kilayim lo afilu beis rova, and kilayim isn't a very small, even a small field, even a base rova. Like the Korban says, kilayim lo afilu beis rova saga chokas kilayim. In order to distance oneself by kilayim, you don't need more than base. You don't need more than base rova, depending on the circumstances, obviously. The article actually brings down the Mishnah from Kilayim Perak Beis Mishnah Ches. Shorotzli Zroim mean echo. Saying what's I'm not sure it's quoting the Mishnah here. I think it's just explaining it. If you want to put Zroim of two different species next to each other, you have to leave a base rova between them. And that is, well, obviously, I don't remember exactly. The base hasayim is two saw. Base rova is a quarter of a saw, so it's much smaller. And in lieu of that, so you can put up mechitzas. But there we have the machlekes over there. What kind of mechitza works? So the same machlekes we have over here. So clearly, even in a very small area, we're dealing with a base rova. It's substituting for a base rova, right? So it's a tiny amount, relatively speaking. In 1/8 of the amount we're speaking about here, well, base rova as opposed to base hasayim. So if Rabbi Yehuda still requires a mechitza shel shesi v'erev, even though it's a small area, So it must be that he always requires a mechitza shel shasi be'erev. So therefore, although one can make a distinction and say, well, there it's kilayim kilayim is different, perhaps, but we have this Messiah that's the same parameters. So if there you have a shesi be'erev mechitza is necessary in this small area. Also here, mechitza shesi be'erev is necessary in this small area. It doesn't, in order to create the distinction by kilayim, mechitza shesi be'erev, by Shabbos also shesi be'erev. So that's the Pekor made up. Again, I'm reading inside. Kilayim lo afilu ha'beis of a saga chokas kilayim. I think the plea because it should be talk road base over. Im Kain who had the Mishavas plea pachas me base sign. I'm not thrilled with this comparison because, like I said before, by Kilayim maybe it's worse because Kilayim is being close together makes it worse. And maybe there's more reason to be machmir as opposed to by Erev being close together makes it better. Closing less in an area, so therefore maybe here it's better. Maybe it's interesting. Pnei Moshe says that they can't, although it's not so mashas way in the words. He says, but they both agree about the shir v'archaka. That's the base rova. So that can't be their machlokas. Right? That can't be if you're going to say Shem Shalukim Kachalukim B'Kilayim, they're not arguing about base rova. That's not the issue. There's not area in the no question of their argument about area, how much area is involved. That everybody agrees in the areas. There's no bechitza, it's a base rova, whatever else the other shurim are there in Messiah's time. So it must be they argue about the mechitza, right? And the mechitza they argue about there is the same mechitza they argue about here. And therefore they must hold in both places, no matter how large or how small the area. You need a shesi be'erev. It's a special kula here, specifically by Shiara, where they are mechim you always need a shesi be'erev, no matter how large, how small the area. Even if it's a small area, you need a shesi be'erev. The large area need a shesi be'erev also. By climate, it's more of a say that despite the fact there's a large separation, you still need mechitza shesi be'erev, and because that could be the only machlokes they have. They're not arguing about the distance in space. You can only be arguing on what kind of fence is necessary, and therefore it must be that if you had a kula, it's only kula here by shayora, not a kula by any other scenario. So therefore, you always require shesi be'erev by kilayim and also shesi be'erev by Shabbos, except specifically in the scenario of a shayora. That's something more elaborate than Moshe and a little bit less mashma in the words, but it's could be that's more works out better. Okay, they're going on to the next issue of the Mishnah. What can be machna? How is your machna in terms of military camp? They have all those leniencies we had mentioned in the Mishnah. Chananya Marmea, 100 people, and we learn out from Gidon. Gidon came with 100 people with him to the Ksei HaMachane. So the Ksei HaMachane is the edge of the enemy camp, but it's the juxtaposition of the 100 to the camp, so therefore we learn a camp as 100. So Rabbi Avina didn't buy this. We didn't like Rabbi Avina buy. It said he was a Machane of 100. He was a Machane with the people which were him 100 yos. That's good, but it's not. It says he came to the enemy Machane. So how can you derive from that juxtaposition that a Machane is 100? So he rejects that. Rabbi Yochanan Mar Asara, 10 is a Machane. Why? Because of this pasuk, Vayavod Narei David Vayidabru Novo. So the exact lashon of the pasuk is Vayavod Narei David Vayidabru Novo Kechol Dvarim Eila B'Shem David Vayanuchu, and they were nach. So there were 10 people, the 10 Narei David, and they came and spoke to Novo, and they were Vayanuchu. They made a machane. Literally means they rested, of course, but they will learn it the lashon machane. So therefore, you see, a machane is 10. Ma Vayanuchu. What's Vayanuchu? Rabbi Yusta Bar Yushona Amar Nasu Machane. Radian Bazi Amar Asara. He said, he also says 10, but he learns that from a very different pasuk, from the Yomim. So the whole pasuk there is Ki le'es yom biyom yavo al David le'ozro. They came to David to help him. Ad l'machaneh gadol l'machaneh Elokim. So he became a great camp like the camp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the machaneh of the fighters, why it was like a machaneh Elokim. The kama machaneh Elokim. How much machaneh Elokim? Asora. The article brings down here for the from the like the Mara and the Korban say, because we learn from others, association was Kimitar Shchina Shvimenem. 10 people sing the Torah, the Shchina is among them. The Pnei Moshe brings down from the Babylonians and Hezbollah and Test, Kol Be'asar Shchinta Sharia. And he brings down also the Medrash in Shmuel says, Kami Machne Lukim, Asora, Asor Nichase Be'ez Knesses Benasa Machne. A minion. Okay, so the Tani b'shem Rabbi Yehuda, Shnei Masar El K'machane Yisrael. The 12,000 makes a machane. Very big difference. Like the machane Yisrael says, Korban that went to fight in the Midbar against Midian, which is 12,000 soldiers. Hayotzim Mechemes Rishus, people go to an optional war. Mutarim begezel etzim lachim. They're allowed to steal softwood. But certain begezel etzim not allowed to steal that's moist wood, but not allowed to steal hardwood. And the Korban says lachim shloya das b'alim aleim, because the moist wood is not yet firewood. So therefore, it's just like twigs. Twigs are allowed to take. But to take actual firewood, they're not allowed to do that. That's with any war which is not like to conquer Eretz Yisrael or to save Jews from their enemies. It's a war to conquer territory. The war of to conquer Eretz Yisrael or against Shiva Amamim, the war against Yisrael Miyad Oivim. So all those mutarim because Eitzi Beishim B'lachim without taking even dry wood and of course moist wood. Because Eitzi Beishim live lachin. Rabbi Nia Bray, Rav Kina Shem Rav Kuna said, Imayu Asin Chavila, if they're already put into a bundle, then a person already designated them as firewood. Also, it's also even by Mechametz Mitzvah. Okay. Akadun Shem Smuchim Chayrish. So this is this seems to be talking about where the wood is not next to a forest. What about if they're next to a forest? Is that also mutter or not? In other words, go chop down your own wood. Right? You're next to the forest anyway. Why should you take the owners of the wood? Go chop down your own wood. Where they're matched even when you're next to the forest, only when they're not next to the forest or even next to the forest, they don't have to eat much shviach. They don't have to go to effort. They can take the whatever wood they find. Similarly, about when they say put into the Yosadaim, Akaduk Shein Sumuch L'Mayim. Okay, that's when they're not next to a spring. I feel Sumuch L'Mayim, they're put even when they're next to a spring. Okay, in the next case, Demai. Nichnu Semel Eir. Out in the field, they're put from the Mai. Boy, they brought the fruit back into a city. Right, so after they came back from the war, are they still put on the mic because they're put in the field? Do we say they're ready? Once they're potter, they remain potter, or do we say when they come into the city, no, they become chai? Now, and vice versa. Yotzim Meir, if they got the food in the city before they went out to make the machne, and then they went out with that fruit, that my fruit to make a machne, kvanis chai is my. Right? So we say that they're ready to chayv in mai, and therefore, even when they take it out, they still have to take off the mai, because they didn't pick up outside when they're mach, they picked out already when they were still inside the city. Okay, the Gemara doesn't resolve the questions. The Gemara says just a general statement. Rabbi Yosef b'shem Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chisa b'shem Rabbi Yehuda and Pazi. What's the derivation with the mai? Tikein lo tikein. The explanatory normally because Shemo Demai, because it's Domai. What is it? Sheish Saibo in Masuka who are low. We're not sure if it's been fixed or not fixed. So that's a general statement about the mind, not pertaining directly to the question we asked, which remains unresolved. Because the bishop said Petur Mil Ariv. They don't have to make Erev. Chibra Hashim Hadad Amar Beruvi Chatzeros. Mention this. It's only that, but still Erev Chatzeros. that they're potter. Ava Be'erev Tchumen, but since Erev Tchumen is the Torah, they wouldn't make an Erev Tchumen, they still have to make Erev Tchumen. Now, it's not talking about the heat of battle, obviously, it's about, when it's just, they're in the Machane, spending Shabbos out in the field, so I go more than 2,000 hours, I have to make it the Erev Tchumen. So, ask the Gemara, Yesh Chatzeres B'Machane? How does Erev Chatzeres relevant to a Machane? It's one big camp. Where's the Erev Chatzeres there? So Gemara answers, the Korban says the next word Korban does too, from Listor to Lahatir. Lahatir only Mishava Machne, to allow the tents in the Machne. Because it's tiny like that, we learned only Mishava Machne, again Korban Eida, ain't Tzrichem Eruv. If it's in a Machne, they don't require an Eruv. Only Mishava Shayara, if you have Olim in a caravan, Tzrichem Eruv. They need an Eruv. Now, there's a lot of ink spilled in what exactly this means. The article seems to learn that we're talking about the enclosure and that the enclosure, not about the eruv chatzeros, the bread, like we learned in the Mishnah when we brought the Korban Eidah there, which is based on the Bavli, but learning about the actual enclosure. You acquired enclosure by Shora, you didn't acquire enclosure by the Machne. But most of the Farshim seem learning, including the Rishonim, Rashba and Ritva, they seem to be learning on tents in the larger enclosure, and evidently the tents are each considered to be separate and distinct. I guess each tent was somehow, maybe because Bedouin tents are like that. Perhaps I don't know the tents that they were used back then. Each one's like a chutzner unto itself. So they're all in a machane. They did not require Erev Chatzeros to make them all one unit, but the Olim and Shayra did require Erev Chatzeros in order to make them one unit, in order for them to be mishtatev together, even though it's not a conventional case of houses on a chutzner, it's a whole bunch of olim together. No, the olim did require Erev Chatzeros. The only time they're make was where they did not by a machne, but not even by a shayora. Even a shayora requires Erev Chatzeros. Korban Eidah mentioned in the Mishnah, though it doesn't mention it in the Gemara. There is this idea that in Rashi and the Bavli, where it's about each oil had its own kind of chutzner within the larger enclosure, and in the machne, despite the fact that each oil had its own enclosure around it, the large enclosure encompassed them all, even without an Erev Chatzeros. But by Shor, each one being independent required an Erev Chatzeros in order for them all to get together. But again, the simple pshat in Yerushalmi is not like it's just a question of the olim themselves. That's a simple pshat in Yerushalmi. Okay, we go on to other halachos about machne. They can camp wherever, army camp can camp wherever it needs to camp. And place where they're killed, they are buried there. In other words, kind of like a Meis Mitzvah, Kana Makoma. Shlo Tamar, you shouldn't say Yasu Karuge Plamusios. Says Karbeda Shloesa K'moshe Osim Anshi Chayil Guma Gedola. They shouldn't make a mass grave like people make a large hole. Zon Kol Mesim Soicha, and they toss all the mason in that. El Kolecha Koim Koimo. Each one acquires its own spot where he fell. In other words, each one gets an individual grave. East Tani Tani also Noison. There are those who say that once they're there, you can't move them elsewhere. And East Tani Tani Mutzah for Noison. Those say you can't remove their graves elsewhere. Amar said Madam Mutzah for Noison. It says you're allowed to move them is when they're buried in a mass grave. Mechunosin. Madam Asim Noison, when you're not allowed to remove them, it's mefuzar. When they're in individual graves, then you can't move them. Just like when they go out, they're parts of all these things. The fourth is so in the way back, they're parts from the Arbad Varim. Okay? Because they're still in Sakona, so they're still in Sakona. Shayim Sakona, but Mnei Shavim Orvin led Baderech. It's you could have learned that. It's like the people who Yetzer Rishus Nichnas to Rishus, but he doesn't that way because it's the next Gemara. Sounds like it's because they're still in danger. So Rabbi Yosef Rabun Shamal Aminado. Rabbi Yosef Rabun learned it from here. the mi arei v'chareid. It says whoever was in fearful and trepidation, Yoshuv Yitzpor should go back in the morning. The Mihar Gilad, go back. Whoever's afraid, should go back in the morning. Why in the morning? Because also way back is dangerous. So Korban elaborates very interestingly. They're going back. So why no morning? Because their enemies are waiting in ambush. So it comes back even the way back. There's a concern with enemies. Therefore, on the way back, they're potter. Inami, or else why they go back in the morning? The stress, according to the first shot, I guess the stress is not so much in the morning. I'm not sure what sphere means according to the first shot. Okay, so Reb Chaim says, according to the first shot, that means b'shviko v'tziftuf, not early in the morning like tzafra in Aramaic, but they should go back making a lot of noise. Okay, so that it says. They should all know to gather together in order to go back in a convoy, so they shouldn't be in danger. The second shot he says here, why are they going back in the morning specifically? And he adds on, interesting. Says if they're going to be walking in the morning, they'll be walking when they should have been davening. They're about to create Shemon Tefillah. So must also on the way back they're potter. Again, because of the danger, so they go back in broad daylight, not at night, in order, even though they might lose Kriya Shema and Tefillah. Yes, Shem Rav said Shem Shal Chasim Peturin. Just like the way back, they go they're potter Me'aradvarim. The way there, the bottom of Advarim, Kav Chizos, and Peturim Me'aradvarim. So the way back, the bottom of Me'aradvarim as well. And that brings us to the end of the parak, Hajjul, Parak Mavli, and also the end of the Yom. So we'll stop here.